Hello and welcome to IndiaPostLive.com, India's first live and interactive news conversation web TV. I'm Prachi Jatanya. It's a special show today because we have with us, joining us in the studio, Mr. T.M. Krishna, who's an eminent Carnatic music vocalist and a man who is known to break traditions. He's also credited with reigniting the interest in this southern classical music genre. Thank you so much, Mr. Krishna, for being with us here in the studio. We also have joining us in the studio Miss Geeta Hariharan. She's a writer of music and a cultural commentator. We also have Mr. S. Gopalakrishnan. He's the editor of Sahapedia. It's an online encyclopedia on music and culture. Thank you so much, all of you. It's a very special show, and we have very interesting guests online who will be joining us to ask questions to all of you, and especially Mr. Krishna. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you for having me over. It's such a pleasure. Thank you.
We'll try and look at the focus on your second book, A Southern Music. And if you can tell me why title the book A Southern Music, the Carnatic Story, with the spelling Carnatic, with the K and a T-I-K.
That's a question that's bothering a lot of people. Actually, we battled with that for a long time. We were wondering whether to go with the C, which is the traditional C and C, and I was very uncomfortable with the phonetic sound of C and Ka, and I was battling with that. The right way to actually pronounce the music is Karnataka music. Now, the logical problem there in a contemporary context is the state of Karnataka. And without a diacritical mark, you have a problem with people calling it Karnataka music. So that was a battle. In Hindi it becomes Karnatak Sangeet, which is fine. But I don't want to use a Hindi term there. So finally, I decided to go with the sound of Ka and K. Some people use a K in the beginning and a C in the end, which again I find it odd in the same word. I find it odd. And I think beyond all this, I just thought it looked much prettier.
Right.
And simple as that. But I just thought that, it was a battle. It was a question whether you should go with a K or with a C.
And a lot of people ask you about it.
Yes, many people have asked me about it. I actually had a note originally written in the book about the spelling, and then I just said,
I looked for it, yes.
No, we thought about it, and then we said, just take it.
Why justify it?
Why go into that? No.
Okay. Also, this is your second book. What brought about the decision to bring out this second book, and why this topic?
See, the first book is a very different kind of book. It was co-authored by myself and musician Bombay Jayashree.
Yes.
And it was more, the idea of bringing that book was to try and celebrate the art. We always felt that there was no celebration of Carnatic music with its, pictorially and even in writing and kind of a celebration of all the greats. So that was a very different idea and came from a different context. This book, I never planned to write this book. But I think through my journey of music, there were a lot of things that were happening in my own world as a person, as a person who interacts in society and music, and there were a lot of things that were going. So I started my research, my own discovery, my own question, meeting scholars and reading and all that over almost 10 years. And out of the blue, basically, HarperCollins said, "Would you like to write something on Carnatic music?" And basically, the two things just came together. And I think it just happened at the right time, in the sense I think I had a lot of ideas and a lot of thoughts all scattered around. And this is a nice way for me to bring it together and kind of see that there was a thread in what was happening in my life as an artist and the way I was dealing with a lot of issues. So for me, it was very special.
Right. On that note, we'll ask our team to play out a particular clip at an event talk that Mr. T.M. Krishna actually was part of at the India International Center in New Delhi yesterday. He actually talks about what the book is and what prompted him to write it. Take a look at this clip.
Honestly, I never expected to write a book like this, or write a book about music as such. When I started writing the book, I never thought it will become this humongous thing that it is. Through a period of time, I think the journey of the music took me to questions. Questions which I want to say were not in terms of dissent, not in terms of agitation, or not in terms of being restless, because usually it's generally associated with restlessness. Most of this is associated with restlessness, and traditionally, as far as art and change go, we always talk about restlessness, that an artist always battles with restlessness. I have a slightly different view about it. I don't think it was restlessness. I think it was more finding more quietness. It is also a questioning of what I believe is my journey and what I believe is my future in this music. So there are many unanswered parts of this book, and I'm glad they are unanswered. And I don't expect that I wrote this book to give answers specifically. Though I am very argumentative, which is my natural self, so it will be argumentative, and I am opinionated, so it is opinionated, and I'm not going to apologize for either one of them.
Let me say at once that I regard this book as a masterpiece. I will not be surprised if it becomes a classic in the lineage of the 19th century work, Sangeeta Sampradaya Pradashini of Subbarama Dikshita.
And to take us through what the book really details, we have Mr. S. Gopalakrishnan. He's read the book and he's actually holding it here in the studio for us, a copy of it. Would you say that it's as close to a Carnatic music encyclopedia as it could be?
Thank you for giving this opportunity to come here first. Before that, I would like to say the context, the time when he has decided to write this book. There is a lot of use. He says that he wanted to celebrate the music. In fact, some sort of celebration is happening in Carnatic music. I would not say that in the case of the Hindustani, but a celebration is happening in last 10 years. There is a lot of new singers are emerging. The understanding is emerging. Many people are listening to it. Then all over the world, people are listening to archiving, going back to the real music or the old music and all. At that time, a performer, a musician is writing something of this kind. It never happened. What Mr. Ramaswamy I was telling, he is comparing it with another masterpiece. But here, as a practicing musician is writing a book of this kind. It didn't happen in any of the Indian languages and in any of the Indian musical traditions. That is my understanding about this particular book. Right. Then it is not an encyclopedia. It has encyclopedic content, but it is Mr. T.M. Krishna's opinion. It is for the first page to last page, all the page can be challenged. In encyclopedia, it is not possible. And he is open for all these questions, and he's open for a debate. And at the last page, he himself says that, right. I'm looking for the next question which I would like to ask. Therefore, first of all, I consider it as a major seminal work in Carnatic music.
Would you say that it can be viewed as an objective assessment of the science and art of Carnatic music?
Absolutely, absolutely. It can be looked at as an objective analysis. But as I already told you, he himself always says in many of the interviews that there's lot of subjective content.
Right.
That is the beauty of this book,
Ms. Geeta, I'll bring you in at this point. It also makes a lot of social commentary. It highlights the gender and the caste bias that has existed in our society. What are your thoughts on it and his music?
Do call me Geeta. I do want to clarify that I don't write specifically on music. I'm here as a fellow cultural practitioner. I write fiction. And I think my interest in what Krishna is trying to do, both through the book, his various articles, and his practice, is ask certain questions that all of us share in cultural practice today. I'm going to be quite specific. Let's not talk about seminal so much as the importance of questioning the kind of arts practice we are part of today, especially when it's linked with tradition. So I'd like to begin with actually asking Krishna about his notions of tradition, especially because in the Carnatic music context, we grew up thinking, for example, that the kacheri format is old. In India, we love to boast about everything being old. And we discovered that not only is it, 100 odd years old, but that it was very much part of the context of the colonial encounter. Right. So that is one. And the second thing I want to ask, tied with that, is it's terribly important in the India we live in to talk about whether tradition, the use of this tradition, justifies the kind of exclusiveness of certain practices, especially in what might be seen as high culture.
Right.
Fabulous questions. Thank you very much. To the first question, about this whole kacheri format. See, one of the things I've dealt in the book also is the fact that our memory of Carnatic music is the recorded history of Carnatic music. Audio recorded history of Carnatic music is our only memory of Carnatic music. So when we talk about Carnatic music, though we speak about it over 2,500 years old, we love everything is 2,500 years old in this country.
Yes.
We are actually referring only to that recorded history. And we are making this huge leap of, I don't know, faith or belief or whatever, and in making this connect over 1,000 or 2,000 years, which in its own construction is flawed, obviously. So, this whole belief that Carnatic music was in a certain fashion, actually the most interesting aspect which I found through my reading is that this whole idea of the kacheri format is so closely wedded to the social issues and the social and the nationalistic issues, and like you rightly said, the colonial encounter of the early 19th century. So this whole formulation of what a concert is not just a musical idea. It is a very strong sociological idea, and therefore we cannot dissociate the two and say this is an aesthetic. In fact, I say it is not an aesthetic expression. It is, in fact, for me, 90% a sociological expression. So, which makes it extremely problematic, and which is why I found it very difficult to accept it as being something of an aesthetic expression. And if you look at the way this art was practiced, and we have some indicators, we have people who've written about it through the centuries, and then you look at what has happened, you actually see maybe actually it's the inverse, that aesthetic parameters have been given the backseat in order to fit it into a certain perception of art, and like you said, high art in a certain context. And to your second question about the word tradition, it's very wedded to the first question. It's probably the most abused word in high art, and especially what we call classical art. And I've said that the word classical is problematic. The word Shastriya Sangeet, in my opinion, is extremely problematic. What is not Shastriya Sangeet is something I don't know. So whether it is Shastriya Sangeet or classical, these are complete commentaries on social hierarchy.
Especially when tradition and culture
Exactly.
is what people practice.
Exactly. And also, like in any other field, the narrative that is usually heard is the narrative of high art, is the narrative of high class. So now the whole thing is very, very complex. And the word tradition, I think, needs to be used with a great amount of sensitivity. Is it being used only in terms of, say, for example, if I take a certain aspect of music and look at a certain way of practicing that music, or say an element, say an alapana? Am I analyzing tradition in terms of alapana practice? But even that, can I deconstruct it or remove it from how it has been influenced by social context, political context? It's very, very difficult. So I think the word tradition is problematic because it is used as a way of commentary of sociology rather than the commentary of music most of the times. And so whether we need that word, and if we do use it, how are we going to use it, is something we are all grappling with.
Right. I'm sure that, with their various experiences and perspective on culture and music, both Mr. Gopal Krishna and Geeta will have a lot of questions through the rest of the conversation for Mr. Krishna. But we'll bring in our first online guest as well, Professor M.V. Narayanan. He is part of the University of Calicut and a professor there. Thank you so much, Mr. Narayanan, if you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Thank you so much for joining us at the conversation, and a special conversation with our special guest here in the studio, Mr. T.M. Krishna. Your question or thoughts about Mr. Krishna's work and his music?
Good afternoon, Mr. Krishna.
Good afternoon.
There's a slight problem that I get a feedback of my own voice. I beg your pardon about that. I was just wondering, in your writings about tradition as well as what you said right now, whether there was a certain kind of joining together of interests of the caste hierarchy and the way in which certain aspects of culture were accommodated into that, along with the colonial agenda, where a certain kind of culture was designated as classical, as high traditional, etc., while actually, in a certain sense of the term, erasing the general roots. I wouldn't want to call it folk roots, but at least the kind of general popular roots that these forms had. But how do you suppose, especially in terms of Carnatic music's lineage from the Sampradaya system, how it has led to a kind of attenuation, a kind of reduction of the possibilities. I was thinking especially of the way in which a particular emphasis on devotion seems to have taken away some of the possibilities that probably Hindustani, other forms of music were able to explore.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Narayanan.
She wants to add a
Geeta
lot.
wants to.
I just wanted to, if I may, Professor Narayan has brought up such a good point that this ties up with a one-line question I had, which is that is it possible to think of a secular Carnatic music? I know secular is a problematic word in the India we live in now, but I think it's important to bring it in.
Yeah,
I mean it in the largest sense.
I think there are many questions in what Professor Narayan said and what you've said to Geeta. First to Professor Narayan, first I think we should first recognize that Carnatic music has predominantly been elite art. It has not been popular art. I think that is something I would like to first state. It is not like it's been elite only in the last century. The Devadasis were part of an elite narrative.
Yes.
Therefore, the community of the Devadasis and the Nagaswara Vidwans were very closely tied to them. They were the same family of musicians. And the king and the Brahmins were all part of an elite narrative. So that is why, for example, the languages used in Carnatic music became Telugu and Sanskrit because the Vijayanagara kings were using those languages. So the court language influenced the language of the music also. So first, it is not something that happened because of the British or post-British. It is something that we need to accept that this has been an elite narrative. What happened is some communities fell out of the elite bracket or maybe forced out of the elite camp. Therefore, exactly. So therefore, they were removed and the music stayed elite. So that's the first point. So whether it was really part of a popular discourse is something that I'm not very sure about. Whether Carnatic music was actually ever part of a popular discourse. Now, you use the word folk. Now, that also brings to the other problematic word. What are we referring to as folk? I mean, would you call Yakshagana folk? Would you call Krishnattam folk? I wouldn't call them folk. So those are commentaries, very social commentaries. So I think that in spite of this, I think what has always happened in the history of art is that the exchange of ideas, of thought processes have always passed on and moved. So it is very possible that melodic ideas that were used in, say, some other form was taken over by the elite class and used as a raga, development raga. All these things, exchanges definitely happened. Rhythmic systems also happened. In rhythmic systems, we can see it very clearly. So I think that first it has been elite art, and therefore now the problem of it being elite art also brings to its circle, its environment, that all that matters to the elite automatically becomes the most important aspect of the music also. This is where the question of devotion comes in. Now, the question of devotion, if you look at the history, I do not believe that though the lyrics would have been connected to some king or some lord right through, that the focus was on that till at least sociologically, say mid-19th century. I connect this whole turnaround of making it religious music as part of this whole nationalistic narrative that happened post mid-19th century, where it became very important to show yourself as being some kind of a pure tradition, some kind of a pure society, an ancient society. Sorry?
And caste hegemony.
And caste hegemony, of course, that's very important. And I think that's when, there is also another play there where Harikatha became such an important musical artistic form. And Harikatha was a religious form.
Yes.
And what happened was, a lot of musicians used to do Harikatha on one day and a kacheri or concert the next day. So the mix-up of those two ideas was very natural. This happened in playing styles, mridagam styles, in accompanying styles, and also happened in terms of content. Till then, there were not so many compositions being sung in what I would call art music. But then Tyagaraja's composition came in. Tyagaraja became a Brahmin symbol. We have to accept that he was a Brahmin symbol. He was a symbol of this purity. And if you look at, and the most interesting thing is, if you read the first biography of Tyagaraja, written by Balajapet Venkatramana Bhagavatar, there is not one story of any of those incidents of Rama saving him, when he was in the forest or whatever, where he sang Mundu Venuga and all these. None of these stories are there. these are stories that the Harikatha Vidwans created because they were telling a story. So that became part of the whole history of, whole story, folklore of Tyagaraja. He became a symbol. And then his compositions started coming onto the art music dais. So slowly, this form became a religious form. And because of the Brahmins' natural love for religion and for ritualism and etc. And I'm not making commentary, I'm making an observation here.
Yes.
It became natural that everybody started talking about the meaning of lyrics, the meaning of what he was saying. That this incident, Rama was walking and he sang this. So it became such a complex issue. And another thing, I think Tyagaraja himself wore many hats. I'm using Tyagaraja as just an example. He wore the hat of being a religious person where he did Nama Sankirtana kind of songs. He also wore the hat of being a pure art music practitioner. We decided to forget about all these different things and put everything into one. So everything became religious music. So today we really don't know whether Carnatic music is art music or religious music. And I ask people, why don't you go to a bhajan session? I mean, how is it very different?
Right. Mr. Gopal.
I would like to ask something about this nationalist question and the caste issue what Professor Narayan and so on. I will just make one quote from Tejaswini Niranjana, who wrote on the Hindustani Sangeet, the formation of Hindustani Sangeet during the nationalist movement. In their view and the nationalized forms, the performative traditions were assimilated often by Hindu middle class women and men and relocated to a different social space. Thus relocated, it was possible to celebrate these are truly Indian, sometimes even as Hindu. Now, then I am coming to your book, one particular portion in the section Thanamal of the Celestial Veena. You said that after Binda, Mukta, M.S. Subbalakshmi, M.L. Vasantakumari, the generation that followed have not given us even one prominent woman musician from this traditional community of artists. The shift happened from to the Chennai and the nationalist movement, how the music was appropriated by the nationalist movement, what happened to Bharatanatyam from Sadhuk to
Yes, of
Bharatanatyam,
course.
all you discussed in detail. One thing I wanted to ask, compared to what Niranjan Tejaswini said, and this particular aspect, why did that particular community never produced a prominent woman after this?
Yeah, I mean, I should say that this is not the fault of the community at all. I think there was a great amount of appropriation of artistic ideas. And we have to accept that there was. I mean, we just have to accept there was appropriation of artistic ideas. So Dhanama was always a great source. I mean, all Carnatic musicians say Dhanama was great. But while you'll have roads named on many Brahmin musicians, there is not one road named on Dhanama in the city of Chennai. So that it's an irony, right? And so therefore they viewed their music as being something old, something special. But they also felt that the modern narrative of Carnatic music, which was the kacheri that they had evolved, was not something that it was part of their culture. So they appropriated musical ideas and fitted them into what they believe was the Brahmin narrative of the art form. And therefore, for example, if you take a concert today, in very musical terms, there are all these elements that you believe a concert should have. I can ask you why. Why can't you have an idea of a concert which the Nagaswara Vidwans have a different narrative to? The natural traditional community of Devadasis had their own narrative to how music should be presented. For example, I've also mentioned the book about how when Bangalore Nagarathramal sang a concert, she sang a concert where she was asked to sing only alaps. Now, that was fascinating for me to read because it was in 1904 or 06, somewhere around that time. I was like, my goodness. So you actually had a community that took certain ideas of the music and presented those ideas in a level of fulfillment. And you could have multiple of those narratives in the art form. But I don't think that the modern stream that came out of all the sociological, political turmoil of that time believed that you could have that because this whole idea of purity, this whole idea of religiosity, this whole idea that this is something very sacred allowed them, for example, that opening. Therefore, it was very...
There also you have mentioned, when you said about the word purity, you were discussing about the Nagaswaram, and just before that you were discussing how the Sadir has become the Bharatanatyam, and when that articulation happened, my question, you mentioned about Nagaswaram, but my question is, why Nagasuram was not taken into the mainstream.
That is completely caste. There is no doubt. This is pure and simple caste. Let's be very clear. The Nagasuram Vidwans had to fight about.
No, but why a Brahmin boy didn't learn it?
It was part of the whole caste narrative. See, the Nagasara Vidwan, if you know the battle that happened even in Thiruvayar, when the first time they had the Aradhana, there was a battle about Nagasura actually playing during the Aradhana. Rajaratna Pillai had to make a huge battle of it. In fact, so there was no question that the Nagasara Vidwans were not considered, it was not considered good for a Brahmin to go and learn the Nagasura. They could exchange musical ideas. That was happening much before. But a Brahmin boy was learning Nagasuram was not something that was thought about. And I think even their community wouldn't permit it. Let's also make that clear. They wouldn't permit that happening. So the whole idea was Nagaswara music was considered attached to the temple music. So they said it's a temple music is fine, only because they played only alapanas. They played only long stretches of alapanas and a small pallavi. How does that fit into religious thought? It doesn't fit into religious thought.
But don't you think above the layer of caste boundaries, there is also, we mustn't forget, the new layer of a sanitized marketplace, which is very happy to stick to this kacheri form in a proscenium space, which glosses over difference.
Yeah, it's good point. I think this whole idea of creating that space itself was problematic, because the idea of creating a proscenium space was also part of showing off a certain art form in a certain class. It was completely about that. So therefore, it had to sanitize itself for all that which will not fit into that space that was being created, which was urban Madras then. And of course, the higher class were basically creating the narrative for that. And I do agree that creating that space was part of a colonial outlook, and it was part of creating a very high class value to a musical form. And therefore, in that narrative, at a time when the whole Devadas system was being questioned, they became from elite to probably one of the lowest rungs in the hierarchy. You had the Nagasara Vidwans who were related. And there is a complexity in their relationship also, which we can't go into, but there is a complexity there. So all this being played there, definitely you had a point.
Right.
I've still not answered your question. I will answer your question.
I noticed.
Right. We'll get in Mr. Damodaran Namboothiri. He is a musician, lyricist and a music director joining us from Kochi on the phone line. Thank you so much, Mr. Namboothiri, for joining us. Your question and views about and for Mr. T.M. Krishna.
Okay. Krishnaji, namaskaram.
Namaskaram.
Maybe somewhere correct. That's a problem. Regional and the caste.
Thank you, sir.
Madras, Kerala, the problem. But if one channel classical music program
Sorry, what did he say?
In the Portuguese channel, the light music
Yes, correct.
problem. The classical music fluent Kerala.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. So yeah, I mean, I think his thoughts were on the contemporary issues that are there, as in terms of teaching, in terms of finding students, and in terms of all the other class hierarchy. And it's interesting that he makes that observation from Kerala, because I would say actually among the 4 states in the south, a state where there is an audience at least that crosses many caste boundaries is actually in Kerala rather than in Tamil Nadu. And it's interesting that even there are certain issues and certain problems that need to be looked at. And I think that's what that's the observation he made.
Right. Mr. Gopal Krishnan?
One point I want to talk is when you were mentioning about the Tamil Ishai movement, mostly it is a very celebrated political movement. But in your case, you have said that the movement stifled its opportunity for a greater musical intervention due to its limited mandate for shifting, from to Sanskrit and Telugu to the Tamil language. Now, though Tamil Ishai had a revolutionary content at a particular historical context, you have chosen to take a position to say that its limitations in musical explorations.
Yes.
If that is the case, can you recollect any modern moment in Carnatic music in the last 75 years?
Actually, none. The truth is none. There has been, honestly, the construction of Carnatic music as you see it today is a construction of 1920s to 40s, whether it is the theory or the practice. Okay, even the theory books were written around that time.
75 years.
Yeah, I don't think there is any real modern point of intervention in the last 75 years. I don't think there is.
I want to point out that it's always, I think it's beneficial to understand one strand of the arts with looking at other strands.
Yes.
So the nationalist project of Tamil Isai, of foregrounding Tamil as the language, which made eminent sense in a particular historical context. If you look at, for example, how Silappatikaram was used, how it was used through the film, for example, to which Karunanidhi wrote the script, there Kannagi became a much more sanitized version. And it embodied not only Tamil but also chastity. And some of these ideas in that context have continued to trouble us today, whether it is the pre-modern nature of our music, high culture music, or the fact that to this day we bear the burden of this chaste woman.
Definitely, and even he said, see, Tamil Isai movement is a very interesting movement. I think it was very interesting. Interestingly, Periyar's observation of that movement is something very important.
You said that.
I think Periyar actually critiqued the whole movement, which is itself fascinating. He basically said that you're doing exactly what the Brahmins are doing in Telugu and Sanskrit in Tamil. You're falling into the same religious, ritualistic idea of high class and high society. You're just doing it in Tamil. So how is this actually a secular narrative in any fashion? And he critiqued the movement. See, my problem with the Tamil Isai movement isn't a problem of aesthetics and art. That's my observation. See, there were two parallel. The most interesting thing is if you read those newspaper cuttings that came at that time, and they actually argued through the Hindu newspaper. It's fascinating. And you had Brahmins on the Tamil Isai, shall we say, board too. Kalki Krishnamurti was one, Tiger Varadacharya, all spoke about Tamil. See, the problem for me was, we're talking about art music here, in the context of art music. If you created a narrative, I'm all for the fact that they were looking for a Tamil narrative of art music. But what happened, it became a linguistic narrative. A purely linguistic narrative in an art music context completely deconstructed the idea of art music. So it actually became quasi-religious music, or like, Tevaram music, for example, which became very problematic. So what happened is, the counter-narrative said, that is the Sanskrit narrative said, you're just using Tamil words and doing religious music. I mean, not that they were doing, the problem is there. So what I would have really thought that movement should have at least gone to is said, that we have Tamil music that is as abstract and as abstractive as Telugu or Sanskrit music. Therefore, the point is art music can be created even with this linguistic sound, not just with a Sanskrit or a Tamil linguistic sound. Unfortunately, they didn't go there with it. They stopped with saying this is religious, this is basically Tamil words instead of Sanskrit words. Now, that kind of limited, if you see the Tamil movement today, Tamil Isai movement is almost non-existent today. And the problem is because they have got caught in that same religious web of saying content in Tamil, literary content in Tamil. What happens to the music then? That is basically my problem with that, with where it went. I thought it was a great opportunity. I think it's a great aesthetic opportunity that was
Like having the Indian upper class rule instead of the foreign ruler.
exactly. It was an opportunity that was.
Right. We also have some video clips we've recorded. We've interviewed a host of music connoisseurs and people who are followers of the music of T.M. Krishna at the India International Center, where we spoke to them. Here's Bhaskar Ghosh and Dr. Sunil Kothari talking about what they think about T.M. Krishna's music and his work. Take a look.
He's a young man. One tends to forget that he's in his 30s, and he's achieved much more than a lot of people twice his age. An extraordinary person, as a writer, as a thinker, as a musician. He's done an enormous amount. One is not aware, people are not aware of the number of trusts, not-for-profit trusts that he's involved with, in spreading music, in spreading social work among people. How much work he's done in Sri Lanka to popularize music there, the arts there. It's another dimension altogether. He's an extraordinary person who will go much higher.
I'm a great devotee of this young man. I met him only very recently when he came and sang for Priyadarshini Govind, a song for her. Normally musicians don't sing for the dancers. But then when I read the book, I was very surprised that he could articulate so well. He transcends to the art music, that even the text is there. Suppose I know Sanskrit very well. If I talk about Gita Govind, I understand all the image of beautiful literature, but he transcends that literature and makes it an abstraction. And I think there lies the great value of his discourse. I'm sure sometimes he disappoints people. Sometimes people think he's whimsical, but he's not whimsical. He's very intelligent, very sharp man. He knows his following. He's a very savvy fellow. He knows his following very well.
Well, continuing our conversation with Mr. T.M. Krishna, Carnatic music vocalist and known as somebody who has broken tradition and reignited the interest in Carnatic music. We also have Ms. Geeta Hariharan and Mr. S. Gopalakrishnan here in the studio. It's a very special conversation, and stay with us and put in your questions for our interesting guests here in the studio at our Twitter handle @IndiaPostLive and our website with your audio and video comments and your feedback and questions for Mr. T.M. Krishna on our website IndiaPostLive.com as the conversation continues. I would also like to talk and speak about Mr. T.M. Krishna, Sanjay Subramanyam, a host of other singers like Abhishek Raghuraman, Sikkil Gurucharan, we have Pantalu Rama, we had Nitishri Mahadevan and Bombay Jayashri. They are credited with bringing tremendous amount of interest in Carnatic music. Before their arrival on the music scene, it was feared that Carnatic music was dying. It was a fear that was a real one. This bevy of singers has used new age technology, facilities of music production to try and propagate Carnatic music and its form in a big way. Mr. Krishna.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is in the 1980s. There was this fear that Carnatic music is dying. Sorry.
In the world of culture, there's always a rumor floated now and then that something is dying. I don't believe it for a moment, and I think it's complete nonsense.
Yeah, so there was this whole belief that it's dying and there are not young people taking up this art. The fact is that the environment was not allowing the young people to take up the art, and that was actually part of the problem. So a bunch of guys got together, guys and girls said, they were all in college then, they said, we will give opportunities for young people who are below the age of 30, which is like unbelievable in the world of classical arts. You have to be at least 60, I think. I don't know what you have to be at that point of time. So in a way, it completely changed the perception of a Carnatic musician. So young people started becoming Carnatic musicians. And I think many of us are product of that movement. And it's through the 90s that whether it was Sanjay Subramanyam, Muni Krishnan, Sudha Raghunathan, of course, slightly senior than us, Vijay Shiva, all of us came through that changeover. And I think Carnatic music, in some ways, I must say Carnatic music is rare, that a so-called classical art form has so many people who sing and play the mridangam violin who are below the age of 50, which is very rare for most so-called classical forms all over the world. So I think actually there is something to celebrate about. There is something definitely to really say this is something to celebrate about. And I think, and I also think in something he said in the beginning, that we are at a very good point now where we have a lot going. It's the best time to ask the difficult questions.
Yes, and may I ask one immediately,
Yeah.
which is precisely because there are young people and we see a the possibility of a vital present and a future, let me ask the difficult question. How do we not just attract young people, which is, Carnatic music has already done, how do we make it more inclusive, not only in terms of age, but also caste, and I must say gender? When are we going to have women, Patamal, so across caste people struggled to get into the music world, but when are we going to have them allowed to play the guttam if they want?
Yeah, I mean, there are one or two, I mean, they're just a rarity. But
Or a woman violinist playing
Yes.
for a top male singer.
Well, you do have them, but they battle so many things, and that's a fact. It's a very good question. I think these are very, very problematic questions, because I think as an environment, we're not willing to address them. In terms of caste, we just believe just because we say we don't stop anybody from coming, people will come. They don't realize there's a culture of art, like a culture of education. There's a culture of going to school.
The doors are
So
closed.
exactly. So the doors are actually closed because you're not welcoming. You're not addressing the issue that you need to go to people and actually welcome them and give them also ownership of this art. We are not. The fact is, the truth is, we are not doing that. We actually think going and giving music to, say, what you could call a lower caste group is actually presenting them a higher class music and doing them a favor. I don't think so. I think that there is no hierarchy in this. And I think only way to address this is go to schools. We have to go to schools. We have to have musicians who become proactive about having people from different communities, from different parts, learning this art form. And I think though nobody talks about caste in a very overt sense, it does play a role in opportunity also. Nobody will say it and they will probably refute it, and you can't argue that obviously, but it does play a role. I have heard stories of musicians from other castes who say that they have felt the difference. You feel this. Most of the time, like I always say, the way I shake my hands with a high-class man is very different from the way I shake my hands with a carpenter in my house. And it's a fact that my hand feels different. And unless I address the fact that I know that my hand is different, it's very difficult. And women, this is still a struggle. Women do play for many male musicians, but there are still male musicians who do not ask for women violinists. There are still male other vocalists who tell violinists who play for them, stop playing for women, and then I will give you more opportunities. Women playing mridangam is considered visually unaesthetic as far as the community is concerned. Nobody will say that way, or playing the guttam. There are very few women who have played mridangam. There's one lady called Sukanya who plays Rajagopal, and she tells a lot of stories and the struggles that she has. But this has to be addressed, and I really hope that the next generation probably has a better willpower to address these issues. But they have to be addressed, and they have to be addressed proactively. I mean, these are not, the biggest problem is everybody thinks everything is at an equal balance. It's not at an equal balance.
It's not a level playing field.
It is not. So therefore, you have to address that it is not a level playing field. And so there has to be a special action taken towards these things.
Yes.
And also I want to say that the organizers are part of this whole game, because they don't put their foot down to an artist who says, I will not play for a woman. They don't come up and say, if you have such a stance, first it's unconstitutional to have a stance like that.
Right.
You cannot have an opportunity. They don't do it.
Deny that
So
opportunity.
there is a very, very deep-seated issue as far as women are concerned and caste is concerned. And a solution for it, honestly, Geeta, I really don't know. But I'm just saying that...
But you've raised politically charged questions,
Yes.
which is the
Definitely.
first step.
Exactly.
Yes.
I hope that the discussion goes somewhere, and maybe there is movement here and there, even if it is two people, one person who says, I will do something. I think that makes a huge difference. And a lot of women who played the violin have turned to vocal only because they know that they have a glass ceiling.
Right.
And they will tell you, beyond this point, I cannot go because the men will not accept me.
Absolutely.
And they are absolutely right.
Right. On that very charged statement and a very interesting question there by Ms. Geeta, we also have Mr. Venkatesh Krishnan joining us from Chennai. He's the National Head of IV Mobile. Thank you so much, Mr. Venkatesh, for joining us. He's joining us on Skype. I believe we'll try and get his connection as soon as possible. But Mr. Gopal Krishnan wants to say something.
No, I just wanted to contain my talks with you on the basis of the book. But okay,
Right.
Venkatesh has come.
Mr. Venkatesh, if you can hear us. Not too
You
sure.
know what Mr. Bhaskar Ghosh was telling about, your visit to Jaffna. It's a very major point. Therefore, I wanted to go back to that one. At a context now, what I was just reading, what is happening in Mosul in Iraq at this moment, where this UNESCO World Heritage art form, the only one classical vocal art form of Iraq is Iraqi Makam, and mostly it is in Mosul where the entire war is happening, and the two statues of two major musicians are demolished 2 weeks back. I read Hindu carried it in the front page. Now, therefore, at this particular moment, I think it is very important. Your visit to Jaffna, and where had a Carnatic music tradition and past and all. Can you just mention, in few words?
I love this conversation because it's very charged and because it keeps you.
Yes.
I thank you for that. Actually, Jaffna was a complete accident in my life. I had gone there in 2010. You would have heard of Neelan Tiruchelvan, the Tamil intellectual, and he was assassinated by the LTT. And his wife, a lovely person, and she did this Memorial Day every year, and she invited me, and I went and sang there, and we sang. I think the theme was harmony or something. So I even sang in Sinhala. I sang in Sinhala and Tamil. And after the concert, she came to me and said, "Krishna, you should go to the northern provinces." And I said, "I will go." Then the Indian High Commissioner was there. He said, "Shall we make this happen?" And I said, "Yes." And so I went there in 2011, honestly not knowing what to expect. And to be very honest, with the arrogance in my mind that I was some kind of deliverance, if I may use that word. You know what I mean? Deliverance of aesthetics and art that somehow is lost over there, and I'm this, after 36 years, I'm this musician going there. And I'm being very honest when I say I had that thing. But when I went there, I didn't give them anything. They gave me much more than I can imagine in my life. And I traveled by bus for a week. I went to Vavunya, Jaffna, Kilinochi, even to Mullaitivu. I went all over and sang in 3 places. And when I met the people there and saw their love and their passion for this art form, not because of T.M. Krishna. T.M. Krishna actually was an incidental happening of that time. But because they really treasured that, of course, language is very important for them. And I went to this Ramanathan Academy for Music. And they asked me, can you come and do a small lecture demonstration? I said, yeah, okay. I thought there'll be 50 people sitting there, young girls. There were about 350 young girls and boys learning dance and music, visual art and everything. And I was really, really, really changed because I said, how did you hold on to all this? I mean, through the war. And they will tell you stories about how they will just hide underground when there was bombing, and half an hour later go back to Bharatanatyam class. I don't think any person in Chennai, in the mecca of Carnatic music, would do that, honestly.
But people under siege
Yeah, I guess so.
to sing and dance
But
as much
the
as
fact that they
anybody else.
treasured it so much, they kept it, made me feel that this cannot be about me. It can't stop with this visit. And so I tried to coordinate this effort for 2 years where we said, let's go with artists, take them, so they speak to younger people, they speak to students about art, and they interact with them, and then they also sing. So, I mean, Unni Krishnan came there, and I keep saying Unni Krishnan was like a rock star had arrived in Jaffna. I mean, he had special security for himself. Of course, his film background also played a role in it. But for his concert, there were 5,000 people in an open Maidan. It was just electrifying. And for me, it's been one of the most learning and enriching experience going back to Yarpanam, as they would prefer to call it, and not Jaffna, every year. And I wish I can do more. I really wish I can do more than, say, Carnatic and Bharatanatyam. But you know how it is to try and to coordinate something like this. I don't know whether it's going to happen this year, for example. I don't know. And the truth is, I don't know. And I hope and pray, which I do very rarely, but I do pray that
Would your
something
publishers
happens.
want to take the book there?
No.
Possibly? Have you considered talking to them?
Yeah, but that has to be in Tamil. If it has to go, it has to be in Tamil because
Right, of course.
they're
We'll get to that question also. Both Gopal Krishnan and I are very curious to ask that question, but we'll bring in Mr. Venkatesh Krishnan once again, try his connection. Mr. Venkatesh joining us from Chennai.
Hi, I thought this conversation of you. I just wanted to ask one question or observation rather. One of you, probably Krishna, could attempt to answer that. One of the questions I have is that I think somebody made a statement that technology has improved music so much, or it has taken. My observation as a listener, I mean, even the days when the technology was not there, musicians were able to do a very good job or a better job than the current, some of the current people. So my observation is that, I mean, that would have helped from a learning perspective. How is that as a listener, I have got a better deal out of this technology from an improvement angle, from a listening angle, rather than, I'm not talking about the Bose speaker coming in or such aspects. That's the question. Second thing is that in the Chennai circle, where I think Krishna said it's a very elitist music. Even now, I think it remains as an elitist music. If you go for some good Paddali concert, etc., you will, or in many concerts, if you see the same universe of people, the market share, if you look at, or the overall the universe of people who are listening, it remains the same, maybe 10,000 people or 15,000 people is the whole universe in a listening concert mode I'm seeing. So people are making statements saying that the Carnatic music has gone leaps and bounds. I mean, to me, it all looks more rhetoric rather than really is it happening. I don't know. I mean, this is my question to Krishna.
Thank you so much, Mr. Venkatesh. He's the National Head of IB Mobility. I correct myself. Thank you so much for joining us at the conversation on India Post Live. Stay with us. Mr. Krishna will try and...
You want somebody else to answer the first question about a listener? What has the listener got from technology?
No, listener, actually, Venkatesh is a close friend of mine. I know both of us are benefited by the technology. It was not possible for me to get into good music in 1980s as I get now. Probably even go back to whether it is a Musiri concert or whether it is your concert. Now it is available with me, and it was not possible. I know T.N. Krishnan had to travel from Tripunithara to Ernakulam, some 12 kilometers, to go and listen to a radio broadcast which is coming on broadcast only through that Subhash Park, through a microphone, through a loudspeaker, and then he had to go back and all. That is not the scene now.
So I think it's a simple, straightforward answer actually for across the arts. It's only when we had the printed book. It's not that you didn't have technology earlier.
Exactly.
They had those reams of paper and so on, or the leaves and so on and
Everything's
so forth.
technology, yeah.
But who had
The
them, who
accessibility.
had access to it.
Exactly.
So in other words, technology, which we in common practice tend to think of as some sort of evil thing, this has been the huge democratizer.
Exactly.
So that you have all kinds of people listening to all kinds of music, have access to all kinds of reading.
At any time.
Almost to an exaggerated point. So that now in cyberspace,
That's the other problem.
with an anonymous, under the condition of anonymity, they can argue, unlike many of us who argue with our names and faces firmly in place.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think enabling people to access the music is something technology has definitely done. But like she said, the problem that comes from it is, does access mean everything? Does access to information mean everything? Has it changed the intensity of engagement is something I would like to ask. I wonder because you can click on something, or because you can wiki something, has your engagement level with that somehow been affected? That's the only thing.
Raises fundamental questions about who an artist is, because anybody can write a blog. Is that a writer?
Exactly.
Now,
Very
the
true.
world and its brother from age 2 to 81 records itself singing and puts it up on YouTube.
These are
So notions of art. Now, we don't want to be elitist, but we don't want to lose critical practice.
absolutely true.
So where do we find that? in
Yeah,
the
I think that's where we have trouble with technology. But I think
Actually, you have mentioned when it comes to the e-learning. And
Yes, I have.
The same bit, the physical presence. I love the way you write it. The space and time when you are physically present with the guru. It is not existing when it is the virtual guru. And
I'll give you one example.
I can't imagine it.
Yeah,
I can't imagine it.
the odd thing is 3 days ago somebody tells me there is Skype class between 2 localities in Chennai.
yes,
That the guru is in Thiruvanmayur and the student is in West Mambalam. Now, I thought this is the most ridiculous thing I've heard of, that it's not as if they are in San Francisco and in Chennai, but between 2 localities when the distance is about 8 k's and they are Skyping. So, it's those are the things that make me wonder. But to his second question, which was about, I'm going to be a little more charitable than him. I do think that the numbers have increased more than 10 or 15,000. I think we have to recognize that the NRI today is a huge player in terms of an audience and in terms of even producing a lot of good musicians, especially North America, has definitely done. But
There's an additional factor there tying into
Yes,
our
I know.
hierarchical
If you go back to that, we can go
discussion.
I think he was mentioning about the class
Yes.
who comes.
No, there is
Yes.
no doubt.
Who
I think
attends
we're
the
all in
concert.
agreement that the class-wise, it's the same class. It is just a branch of the same class.
Class-wise, community-wise, caste-wise.
Caste-wise. I mean, I completely agree that there is. I think that is one of the fundamental issues that need addressing. But I do think, if I want to give it a positive spin, in that community there is an increase in numbers. That I would definitely
No,
say.
I do not know how much time we have.
But before
I'll just get in Mr. Venkatesh. Mr. Venkatesh, if you're still with us.
Yes, I think wanted to. I think Krishna answered the second question, and Gopalakrishnan answered the first question. I am not talking about most obvious things which anybody could understand what technology could enable from a e-learning perspective or access to music or archiving of music. But does that affect an improvement of the classical music per se from a listening standpoint? To me, I mean, as a listener, I see a great decline of musicians in general. I'm not saying one particular P.M. Krishna or Sanjay must be singing very well. That doesn't mean that in general, if I see the average, there's a decline. I will not blame them. I will not blame the musician because the listener wants to consume a fast food kind of music. Probably that's the reason why it is happening. I don't know. I'm pondering what's the reason. But in spite of all technology being available, I, as a listener, my grouse is that my listening to the new generation has been not as good as the old generation. This is my observation. This may not be the popular perception, and so how does technology enable in improvement of a musician's rendition?
Right.
I'm going to say something. There's an elitist narrative in what he's saying, actually, if I may say so. There is a narrative of him positioning himself as being not part of a popular narrative. That itself is a very interesting position that one puts ourselves. Please don't get me wrong. I'm just trying to address. Please don't get me wrong here. You understand what I'm saying? By saying that I don't get this pleasure that I get in Mushri Subramania's recording of 1924, this is a standard elitist narrative that we have, that those days were better than these days. Now, aesthetically we can argue that, but I will argue that another day, not today. So, but the problem, two things you have to realize. I have great difficulty in people describing the last 15 years of Carnatic music as being aesthetically downtrended. I would like to say that anything that you see today is a reflection of what also happened in 1920.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You cannot distance the happenings of today from the past just because it's Palghat Maniar or Adikudi Ramanujanga or M.D. Ramanathan or whoever you may think is the greatest musician. I hold them as responsible. In fact, more responsible, if I may say so, for what has happened to Carnatic music. So it is not a jump of history that has happened. It is the fact that there has been a constant movement towards a direction which you recognize today from your perception of art, which you're most entitled to have, as being, if I may use the word, degenerative of some sort, with exceptions of who you think reflect more of that old that you treasure. Now, there could be parallel people saying parallel things who also don't consider themselves popular. You get what I'm saying? They will also say, I'm not part of the popular group who go to the concerts where there are 2,000 people. I only go to these concerts where there are things. So the difficulty here is there's a huge subjective angle to this. The difficulty also here is I think it is unfair. First of all, you did not listen to Shemaguri Srinivas when he was 21.
Very true.
You don't know how he sang. Let us be very clear about that. I will tell you that the talent today that you have in Carnatic music past my generation, the music that they sing when they are 18, 19 is far, far, far superior than what I sang when I was 18 and 19. And I'm saying this with all honesty. Now, are there people who I don't consider great music? Of course there are. That's because I have a certain perception. Now, all I'm saying here is that we should remember that there is continuity of some sort happening in all these movements. And let's not just say, we have this very easy idea of the new generation or the modernity. But modernity is only a result of what has constantly happened. So we should hold all of us responsible for it, is all I'm saying.
But actually, this is a, if I may, it's a double-edged question. Because on the one hand, there is the continuity you're speaking of. You might argue that is he talking about the ossification of a particular tradition? On the other hand, the ossification might also mean a tremendous technical expertise, but the tradition continues to be excluding and exclusive. But I must also add a human detail here. I'm sure I'm older than the gentleman who's calling in. This is a great romanticism we have in various aspects of life, that the hankering after a golden past, when everybody was better and everything was better, it's simply not true. We hanker after a golden future.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, before you come to that, we have a vocalist of the Iyer project, a Carnatic rock band. We have Chandramouli, who's joining us now. Welcome to the conversation here on India Post Live.
Hi.
Please go ahead with your question or thoughts to Mr. T.M. Krishna.
Hello, Mr. Krishna. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Yes, I had a couple of questions. The first one was, what are your opinions about modern day Carnatic vocalists getting more inclined towards the film music?
By inclined, you mean singing in films? That's what you mean?
Not influence. I mean, they start off as Carnatic musicians doing kacheris and all that, but then
They sing in
get a
films.
break.
They have to pay the bills.
They start singing in films, right? So, I mean,
Yes,
I'm
yes.
laughing because I have a very cruel lady next to me. Her name is Geeta, by the way. I'm not going to parrot what she said to me, but yeah, I mean, I have actually no problems with that. But you know, I really don't think there was anything wrong in an Unni Krishnan or an Nityashree singing in films. I don't see it as being stepping down in some fashion at all. I think the art of singing in films actually is a very, very different art form. And to learn that skill is a different skill. It's not like because Carnatic music, you can sing any music. That, by the way, any Carnatic musician tells you he is talking nonsense. Because Carnatic music can sing any music is absolute nonsense. You need a different skill set. You must have the awareness to absorb that skill set. What you have is a certain practice that gives you a certain outlook towards art that helps you in being able to access many things. But that's true of any other art form too,
Yes,
not
if I
just
wrote
Carnatic
poetry,
music.
it would be terrible.
Exactly. So that is the point. Now, but the only, if I was going to say the only problem there, I feel sometimes, is that if the Carnatic musician is not well grounded in their own form, before they start accessing, going to these forms, there is sometimes it being reflected when they come back to the Carnatic form. And that sometimes can be problematic. So, who makes the call of when is to access? It's completely personal. I cannot judge for anybody else. But I think one has to be, shall we say, humble about their own self, humble about their own art, and try to see if they have that base, that foundation to be able to cross all these different genres and come back and retain each the way they view it.
Right.
But I don't see a problem in it otherwise. No issues.
Right. You have another question?
yes, I had. Thank you so much for that. The second question which I have is that I personally feel that change is the only constant. So, when it comes to Carnatic music, do you think in a modern day, say a kacheri, instead of having just one mridangam and a violinist and say a tambura in the background and the vocalist singing it, do you think maybe an addition like a string quartet can spice things up?
Right. I'll just give an add-on question. You have also grumbled a little bit about fusion music in the book, and of course touched upon it. Your views. I think it's a quote.
See, I think I didn't get his name. What is your name? Sorry.
Chandramouli.
Chandramouli, I think the question is not about change, and the question is not about that. The problem with that question is, why do you want a quartet? That's the first question I'll ask you. What is the quartet doing to the art form? What is the aesthetic idea of Carnatic music? What is the aesthetic idea of an alapana? Now adding layers of harmony, is that in some way deconstructing the idea of raga? Now, these are the questions that interest me. Now, my problem with adding drums or, a rhythm pad, which is, we can add anything we
Well,
want.
the violin coming in didn't change the fundamental nature.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. The most beautiful part of the fact that we have had the idea of fusion is when the violin came in, the violin is not tuned like the Western violin. The position is not the same. The understanding that there is a certain aesthetic value to this form in its own continuity and continuum, and that whatever is brought in, or whatever.
Absorbed.
Exactly. Now I don't have, in fact I've always said I want to hear Carnatic music in an acoustic guitar. I've always said I want to hear it. I'm very curious because I just get a sense that sound and Carnatic and Indian music will somehow go. I know it's very hard to do. But the question I should ask is, if you're thinking of these changes, are you thinking of these changes to spice it up? Or are you thinking of these changes because you think that these can be absorbed into the aesthetic universe within which you want them to be present? To me, the latter is far more important. And if the latter, if you're able to view the latter well, I don't have a problem in any other instrument. The mandolin came in, the electric guitar has come in, and today we don't even view it as being, fusion. So I don't have an issue with it as long as I think the perspective or the reason why you're thinking of this is slightly more than just to make a difference, slightly more than just to make it attractive for the younger generation.
But isn't it about experimenting? Music is about creative experimentation, then wouldn't fusion really add some value?
Now you're calling like I said, the violin was. The value is, what is the standpoint you're coming from? Why are you experimenting? That is the whole question.
Actually, if I may add, I think experiment is a very serious business. It means risk-taking. It means going against the grain, both in terms of your arts practice as well as the marketplace. So the simpler one, say in terms of the marketplace. Now, when Krishna decides that I'm not going to be bullied by a certain kacheri format, and I'm just going to sing Ragam Tanam Pallavi. Now, it is not that he is doing something new, quote unquote, that is unheard of, but he's going against the grain. He says, well, I'm going to explore this in depth. This is a very serious experiment. So, while of course we hope to have consumers of our practice, but spicing it up is just not enough. We have to actually experiment as to mean something.
I think her point of experimenting being very serious is very important. And I think that's the attitude we should carry when we explore these possibilities. And then you don't know, something may come up. And
I have something to say in connection with, but I'm going back to the particular point which you said that, unfortunately there was no more modern moment in Carnatic music. Take the example Carnatic vocalism. If you take, how do you rate the experiment? We were saying about the experiment what Aryakudi did. The experiment what a person like Balamurali Krishna did. How do you, whether these were modern moments?
I mean, I placed Aryakudi in the pre-75 years. That's why I did not include him as a modern moment, by the way. He is a modern moment if you include him in this space. I have a problem with that modern moment. A serious disagreement with that modern moment. But it is a modern moment.
Not a value judgment.
But it's a modern moment. I don't think Balamurali Krishna's movement has really influenced the world of Carnatic music.
Absolutely.
Therefore, I'm not unable to call it objectively as a modern movement. So that is why I feel post the 1920s, 30s, when all these things happen, there's not much that has really happened.
Then another particular point which you mentioned, again coming to the experimental part, the Cleveland Festival was only continuing the established practices within Carnatic music, but this led to a transference of the same parameters to the American context. What is this American context?
The American context is very natural. First of all, a minority context, a context of people leaving this country, going there, trying to hold on to that culture or whatever they believed, especially the Brahmin community. So they were trying to celebrate all that within their own communities, building a temple, all these things come in. So it was, but the world around was a very different world. The world around is a very American world. So many of them, for example, still live two lives. The one will be the shall we say American life, if you want to use that term. Another will be that sense of Indianness, so that sense that they hold. So in this environment, a festival was designed over there. So it straddles both worlds. It has a context of being, shall we say, American modern or American contemporary. At the same time, it straddles by saying, I'm going back to Tyagaraja of the 19th century and I'm reviving his religiosity and celebrating the great devotional nature of his music though we call it Carnatic music in art music. So in a way, that was a very different. Here it's very natural. Within our own Brahmin world, both almost exist together. The house and outside the house is the same. The environment, the friends, everything is the same. There it is not like that. So in that context, yet they were able to continuously access this and transplant this completely for their own.
But you know, you use a very interesting image of the house. And I'm thinking of Anantamurthy's image of the front yard and the backyard.
Yes.
Let's not forget, in the front yard where men come and go,
yes,
and the American life and modernity, quote unquote, I'm not quite sure we can talk about modernity like that, exists. And in the backyard where you have the temples and the women and, you know, sitting there waiting for you, ye olde India, museumized India, very different from the India we know and live in.
Yes.
And you know, so you consolidate your idea of Indian museumized establishment.
Exactly. That's
so I think it's a very problematic.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, all I said this,
situation.
when I said this with the context that is extremely problematic.
I know you think that.
It's extremely problematic. And also the word modernity was used in that skewed sense that it's being used in the context that because
I want you to underline that.
Yes, I
know
agree
you
with
think
you.
It's problematic.
Yeah, so that is why I find that whole environment deeply problematic.
We'll get in one final question from from Professor M.V. Narayanan, joining us again on the phone line from Kerala. He is representing the University of Calicut. Thank you so much, Mr. Narayanan. Your question, sir?
Mr. Krishna, I have to say that the discussion was really fascinating, especially in terms of the way you conceive the dialogue between art and critique, or art and power. I'm not very sure if I've got this question right, but probably one of the features of music or any other art form, performance or literature, is that despite the compartments that power or critique wants to put them into, art always escapes. There is some kind of a polyphony that is built into the very structure of art itself, which probably comes from contemporary experience, from some form of inspiration which is internal or external. What would you say are those new stirrings within Carnatic music right now that would redefine the form?
Well, I think that's close to what Mr. Gopalakrishnan asked. I think unfortunately the truth is there are not any real stirrings in the Carnatic world. We are very, very happy with status quo. We are very comfortable with going back to 1920s for everything. And therefore, and I also want to say in purely musical terms, the last great piece of, say, musicological writing in Carnatic music was written in 1904. Before that, it was 200 years before that. So just look at, even on the context of musicology, you don't really have a contribution in the last 100 years that is so necessary for an art form, even in a theoretical sense. The thing is, I think the marketplace has become a very good place to be in. And it is, and the little world that the Carnatic world has is a successful world in its own sense. So therefore, the balance of that, everybody is very happy with. And so therefore and right now, to be honest, the profit margins are increasing. Let's be very clear, we are actually on an ascent professionally. And so therefore, there is unfortunately no rumblings. There's unfortunately no call for saying we need to look into ourselves, into what we call art, what we call society, into who these people are and all these things. So therefore, I have to concede that I say this with great disappointment that there are hardly any rumblings in the Carnatic world.
And talking of status quos and stirrings, we'll have to establish status quo here.
No, before that, I had one thing I have to respond to a question which I did not.
Please
about
do.
Whether Carnatic music can ever be secular. I have written about this, and it is a very interesting challenge because there are two parts to the challenge. Now, do I start singing, for example, songs that have lyrics from different religions, hypothetically? Whether it is Judaism, whether it's Christianity or Islam.
Or has something to do with no religion.
Exactly. Now, while I have tried doing that, I have actually tried singing no religion. But the conflict there, and I've also stated that it's a conflict in the book, is I do believe that the idea of meaning in art music is not literality of word meaning. And I would believe that the role of literature in compositions goes beyond the word meaning of literature. If you look at the ways the compositions are created, it's very clear the composers looked at an aesthetic confluence of language construction and melodic construction. And that's how I look at language in Carnatic music specifically. Therefore, now the problem that is, if I say that, by attaching word meaning to something else, am I falling into the same trap? Is a problem. You understand what I'm saying? That the word, if I say Rama is not Rama, but it's about how Ra and Ma as a phonetic combination in the language mold with the raga melodic movement at the point that is what is the creation of the composer. Then if I say Rama is irrelevant to me, if I put Allah over there, then am I saying same thing about Allah? Am I creating the same image for Allah or the tree or for the river? So there are two ways of doing it. One, I say, yes, I just changed the lyrical meaning to something else, non-religious, or I feel very strongly that the approach more is to see actually out. This is out of research. This is not done out of looking at compositions and actually seeing that even a Tyagaraja, even a Dikshitar, with all their sociological religious conditioning, saw beyond the Kamakshi that they wrote about.
But this is a little more complicated. I don't think it's an either-or situation. The truth of the matter is, those of us who've grown up listening to Carnatic music, whether you disagree with what's being sung, whether you don't even understand, because not many of us know Telugu, it still creates goose flesh. So it's not a question of response. So that is one. But I would say, not just as somebody who privileges the word, but if Kriti is so central to Carnatic music, and that is how the present day tradition, quote unquote, exists, even if you say, what does it matter? And we all know that the music moves you even if you don't understand anything about the music. But finally, it's like a translation. You make do, 80% of reading the Iliad or the Odyssey or the Ramayana or the Silapadikaram in a translated language, you still have joy, But there is that area that you don't have access to, either because you don't know the language or the nature of the community, caste, and religious affiliation excludes you from participating.
No, I agree with you, but I agree with your point, and I agree that there is an issue there. But I still feel that the understanding of language has to change among the community first, because one of the problems because of that is we as a community put it on your face that we are singing about Rama, Krishna, and it is about that. My whole effort and my whole thought process is, I don't think even Tyagaraja, when he sang Enduku Peddala, or take Jagadananda Karaka as an example, it has words all over. You just look at the pauses given. Those pauses completely deconstruct the word meaning. Completely. So I am saying that there was a perception in art music that they were looking at a certain combination of, shall we say, language construction and musical construction that became inseparable. The content of it was, of course, their own conditioning. My own feeling is that we need to try and move towards that understanding, which I do concede still will create problems because certain words will have certain recalls, whether you like it or not, certain environments. But I still feel that that is, for the art form itself, a better direction to go. Now, parallelly, can we at the same time have, say, songs on trees and things? Yes.
Or a love poem.
Love poem, and we've had it. So maybe they are parallel narratives. Maybe this is a very, very long-term kind of an idea, and I agree this is a long-term idea. And that is more maybe an immediate, shall we say, bringing in together and then showing that it can go beyond. I do agree it's possible, and honestly, that is something that I have been thinking about. And in the book, I in fact say I do not know. I really don't know which direction to go.
30 seconds. Just mentioning the book, A Southern Music, the Carnatic Story, will we see it in Tamil?
They have been, well, I really hope that it will be in Tamil. There's been some interest in that. There's also been interest in Kannada. I really hope that it will be seen at least in a few languages, and not necessarily just South Indian languages. I would like to believe that beyond that it can go.
When it comes to the technical part of the books, when you discuss about the Tala, Raga and all, I personally wish to have a CD along with it. You might have seen these Lalgudi's Incurable Romantic came with a CD.
That's right.
Wherever it is, then it would be better for people like us. So
All I'll say is that it was considered and we discussed it a lot. And finally, we went against it for one reason, is that the CD, we thought the CD is sung by me, for example. Or I felt that if you put a CD, then the book becomes about me.
Right. Very interesting.
And I
And
was,
they
I was,
listen and not read.
and I was a little uncomfortable with that.
Well, you should not deprive us of the privilege of having you conclude this conversation with a Mangalam, and I thank both our guests and all our online participants. It has been one of the most interesting conversations in IndiaPostLive.com, and it was indeed an honor to have you here and talk about your book and the various topics you touched upon about music, Carnatic music, and your views on all of
I must thank you for having me. I must thank Geeta and Gopalakrishnan because
you can thank us by concluding with a Mangalam, please.
I will not sing a Mangalam. I'll just sing a little piece of music and you can finish
Please
with
do.
that.
That's
Thank
to
you
us,
so much.
preferably.
This
I'll go with the habituated tradition now of a song that is usually sung at the end of a Tyagaraja Utsava. So let's just fall into the trap before we go because it's a beautiful song, no other reason. Geetarthamu Sangeetarthamu Sangeetarthamu Sangeetanandamu Nita Puna Judara O Manasa Geetarthamu Sangeeta Nandamu.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And with that, we'll get our viewers and listeners to actually log in live. And this was a live conversation with Carnatic music vocalist Mr. T.M. Krishna. I thank our guests as well, Ms. Geeta Hariharan and Mr. S. Gopalakrishnan for their participation, time and views here. You can watch and log on to our website IndiaPostLive.com and watch this conversation. Put in your feedback, your views and your thoughts about this entire conversation and show on our website and our Twitter handle @IndiaPostLive. Thank you so much for watching, and I thank Mr. Krishna again. Thank you. Goodbye.